Hello and welcome to Genesis, the language of creation, class number 17. I am Rabbi Rafi Mallet, everybody's Rabbi, and we have with us in the studio Lisa, Colin, and Shrey. We have in the YouTube chat Liz, and Liz is here, and Sean, and would like to welcome you all to the class. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, become a channel member. Hello, Sandy. You could support the channel by becoming a member. You can support the channel by donating to the donation links in the video description. You could also shop at artscroll.com/Rebbi Rafi, Rebbirafi, and I will earn a commission for anything you purchase on that website. And let me know if my audio and video are okay. You could see the background image over here, which was generated by Google Gemini. It's nice. It's a big blue whale rising up out of the ocean, but it's a little funny because all the sea creatures are flying in the sky. Flying sharks, where's over here? Flying stingray. Here's a flying stingray. You got flying jellyfish, all kinds of flying fish over here. So I didn't spend time trying to teach Google Gemini that sea creatures go in the water. I thought it was a cool picture anyway, so I'm using it as my background. And fine. Any questions or comments before we begin? I will make a comment actually. On Shabbos, over Shabbos, a very prominent teacher of mine passed away. Some of you may be aware. His name was Rabbi Berel Wein, and he was a very well-known person, a prolific author, a renowned scholar, speaker, someone who was a teacher of mine in Or Sameach Yeshiva. He was most famous maybe for teaching Jewish history. He produced a number of Jewish history films, in addition to the books that he wrote on the subject and the many lectures that he produced. I was part of his Jewish history course for 2 years in Israel. I had the opportunity to speak to him one-on-one, to visit him in his home. He was a person who, even prior to that, I first came to know him when I was after high school. I came to study in Or Sameach at the age of 17, actually, but I shortly thereafter turned 18. And one of our classes, I think, was the first class we had in the morning, was Rabbi Berel Wein class on Navi, on the prophets, teaching the prophets. And I have to say my attendance record was not pristine at that age. I didn't attend too many of those classes, but I did become aware of him. Later, I remember after I came back to the United States and I was in college, I went for Shabbos to someone's house, and I found in their basement this, or I don't know if I found it in their basement. I was sleeping in the basement, but they had like a guest accommodation. Somehow in the house, I came across his book, his big thick book called, I think it was called Herald of Destiny, something like that. There was a Jewish history series that he wrote. There were 3 parts to it. Echoes of Glory, that's what it was called. So there's Echoes of Glory, Herald of Destiny, and Triumph of Survival are the 3 in the series. Echoes of Glory is the classical period, essentially the Second Temple period. What I say, Herald of Destiny, I think, is the medieval period, and Triumph of Survival is the so-called modern period. Then he wrote Faith and Fate, the story of the Jewish people in the 20th century, and so on and so forth. But I got the first book in the series on the classical period, called, I said already what the name of it, Echoes of Glory. And I remember I sat the whole Shabbos just poring over this book. I couldn't put it down. I didn't socialize at all. Like I was, I was just so into this book. And around the similar period, I found myself managing a Torah tape library in the yeshiva called Or Yitzchak, where I was studying in Brooklyn, New York. Or Yitzchak, which is named for Yitzchak Wallerstein, the father of Rabbi Zechariah Wallerstein, who became my Rebbe. And so in the yeshiva Or Yitzchak, there was a tape library, so people could borrow tapes, little cassettes, recordings of Torah lectures from many renowned Torah speakers, teachers, lecturers. And among the different speakers that we had in the library was Rabbi Berel Wein. And I was like, oh, I know that guy, right? He's the guy whose class I didn't go to. Anyway, I started listening to his tapes, a Jewish history series. And, I had discovered his book and I was just like, loved it. So here I found his tapes on Jewish history and I just listened to hours and hours. And I must have listened to every single tape. And I became like an evangelist for Rabbi Wein. I was like, you got to listen to this guy. You got to listen to these tapes. There were people that I got very into his tapes, who to this day still thank me for having introduced them to Rabbi Berel Wein. So it was after that, when I got married and I moved back to Israel to study full time in what's called a kollel, that I entered this program in Or Sameach, the yeshiva Or Sameach, called Or Lagola. Literally means the light to the exile. And it was training young rabbis to go out to the diaspora and teach Jewish communities in the diaspora. And one of the lecturers, one of the teachers in this course was Rabbi Wein, who gave a 2-year course in Jewish history, which at that point I was already like a big aficionado of his. And so I just lapped up every word. And like I said, I had the opportunity to speak to him and to visit him. And I wouldn't say that I was in any way close to him, but I had a tremendous amount of adoration for him, I guess you might say, and affection, tremendous affection for him. He was a person I could hang on his every word. I could listen to him talk forever. He could just talk and talk, and I never wanted him to stop. Of course, time went on and he grew very elderly, and I don't know how old he was when he passed away, but he was not a youngster. I'm going to guess he was in his high 80s, I would guess. And it's a great loss for the Jewish people. It's a great loss for the world. So that is very recent. And so tonight, as we study, I want to remember Rabbi Berel Wein. And for anyone that's listening to my voice, please consider looking into his books and his teachings, his lectures, his films that he produced on Jewish history. Berel Wein, Berel, last name Wein, Wein. Okay, so just, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I think we're all wondering when you were 17 if there were jokes, because that's not a name that you could forget. I mean, you spelled it out for us, but I think all of us are going to remember Berel Wein for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Berel Wein, because it sounds like a barrel of wine, right? So Berel is a Yiddish name for a bear. Bear in English and in Yiddish, which is based on Old German, is a bear. Okay, so many Jews had a double name, that a Hebrew name and a Yiddish name. So a person whose Hebrew name was Dov, and Dov means bear, they might be known as Dov Bear. Okay, and a nickname for bear would be Berel. Berel. So Berel is like a nickname for bear, and many Jews were named Bear. Happens to be many Jews are named Bear. Dov is a popular Jewish name. Dov Bear, Berel. And Wein is Wein. I don't know what it means, but it's also a fairly common Jewish name. Wine or Wein, Weiner, right? I'm sure it has something to do with a vine, or what we call wine today, W-I-N-E. I'm sure, I would guess it's related to that. Be that as it may, he's an American-born fellow, and he just had a very prestigious and prominent rabbinic career. He spent the last number of decades in his life as the congregational rabbi of a synagogue in Jerusalem, which I listened to his the eulogies they said at the funeral that was put on YouTube, and I listened to those. And I think it was his son-in-law who said that was his lifelong dream. Unless it was his son-in-law, one of the people who gave a eulogy for him, said it was his lifelong dream to be, a rabbi of a congregation in the Holy Land, and especially Jerusalem, and he lived to see his dream fulfilled. So, I think we even asked him about it, like, did anyone ever make that pun? And at the time, maybe he said, yeah, obviously people made that pun. I think he was musing about writing a book with the name, like Barrels of Wine or something, wisdom from Rabbi Berel wine. I think he did publish a book called Vintage Wine, which I didn't read it, but I imagine contains some of his important teachings. So you could look him up. Like I say, he's someone that had a great influence on me, and through many different media, through printed media, through recorded media, and from being my real life human teacher. So I highly recommend all his material. So after this class, go look up Berel Wine and enjoy. And it should be a credit to his soul, and may his neshama be elevated in the next world. Okay. That said, any questions or comments before we begin? I think I asked that already. I'm going to put the text on the screen, and we'll get right into it. Of course, interrupt at any time with questions or comments. Last time we started day number 5, verse 20. We said, and God said, Yishrutzu hamayim, let the waters teem, swarm, move, produce, sheretz nephesh chayya, sheretz, crawling creatures, we said, nephesh chayya, of a living spirit. We spoke about that. V'of ye'ofef al haaretz, and flying creatures flying over the earth, al panei rikia hashamayim, over the face of the firmament of the heavens. And for what we said about that, go back to last week. And now we go to verse 21, which reads as follows. Vayivra Elohim et hataninim hagdolim ve'et kol nephesh chayya haromeset asher sharetzu hamayim limineihem ve'et kol of kanaf liminehu vayar Elohim kitov. Okay, that's some of the cantillation. Let's read it one piece at a time. Okay, so we have Vayivra Elohim. Now, we haven't seen the word Vayivra, but we've seen enough by now that if you're savvy, you can translate this phrase. So how would you translate this phrase?
And he created.
Okay, who created?
Elohim.
Right. And God created. What did he create? Okay, so there's the object. What's the object? Hataninim. Okay, now it goes together, hataninim hagedolim, but let's tackle one word at a time. So we have the definite article, the. We have the im ending, which indicates plural. It's a plural of tanin. Now, what is a tanin? Okay, any thoughts on a tanin? So we'll find that tanin is used a couple of ways in Tanakh. One of those ways is to refer to a snake. For example, the creature that the staff of Aaron or Moses, I don't remember, we could look it up actually, turns into. is called a tannin in one place and a nachash in another place. Now, nachash, according to all accounts, is a snake or a serpent, and tannin seems to be used interchangeably with that in that context. So let's take a look. I'm going to show you a handy website. This website is called alhatorah.org, and it's basically an online concordance. So if I go here, search text or search words, right, and I type in the word tannin, okay, let's see what we come up with. Okay, so for the first instance is here, Bereshit 121. But look, then when it comes up again in Shemot, in Exodus 7:9, where it says, when Pharaoh speaks to you saying, give a sign, and you will say to Aaron, so God is instructing Moshe, you will say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it before Pharaoh. Yehila tanin, it shall be a tanin. So the staff will turn into a tanin. And then we have in verse number 10, Moshe and Aaron came to Pharaoh, and they did so as Hashem commanded. And Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a tanin. And then in verse 12 here, each man, right, Pharaoh's magicians, each man threw down his staff, vayiyule tanninim, and they became tanninim. And then it says, and Aaron's staff swallowed their staffs. And then you have some more here in this verse in Isaiah, on that day God shall yivkod Hashem acharba hakasha v'agadola v'chazaka al Leviathan. It talks about God sort of punishing the Leviathan, and it says with his great and mighty sword, and it calls the Leviathan Nachash Bariach, a snake, Nachash, a snake that is Bariach. Bariach, a Bariach in Hebrew is like we had this in Jonah. It's kind of like a bar, if you will, like like a cross beam, like a beam. A bariach is like a beam, okay? So Nachash Bariach, the beam-like snake. So it's described as a snake which is like broad, big, thick, strong, and straight and long, right? Imagine a snake like a beam. That's the Leviathan, the snake that's like a beam. Va'alivyatan nachash al kalton. And also, upon God's gonna literally remember his sword visit his sword upon the Leviathan Nachash Bariach, the Leviathan, which is the beam-like snake, Va'alivyatan Nachash Akalaton, and the Leviathan, which is Nachash Akalaton. Again, Nachash snake. Akalaton means bent, the bent snake. Okay, so there's a straight snake and there's a bent snake, and both of them are called Leviathan. And God's going to visit his sword upon this is some kind of end times prophecy. The haraget hatanin, and he will kill the tanin asher bayam that is in the sea. So you see the word again, tanin and nachash used interchangeably. Now, where did we see tanin and nachash used interchangeably before? So again, here we have Aaron's staff turning into a tanin, but in another place it's definitely called a nachash. So we'd have to go look at Exodus to see that. If I click on that, what happens? I don't know what it's showing me right now. So maybe we'll look at it in Sefaria, or you could just take my word for it. But were you able to see that, what I was showing you, or you were not able to see it?
No, we could see.
You were able to see. Okay. So now, okay. So tanin is used to mean a snake sometimes. It's also used to mean a crocodile. I'm thinking of a passage in Ezekiel, but I don't see it. It could be because it's spelled a little bit differently over there. I'm looking at this again just to see other places where it comes up. Tanin, where it's like clear that it's talking about a crocodile, but I don't see it. Like, I don't see a clear context for it. You know, you definitely see context that it's some type of a sea creature sometimes. But there are other contexts where it's referred to where it's like a crocodile in the Nile, the crocodile Nile, for example. I'm thinking of a passage in Ezekiel, but I don't know the citation. And here, for some reason, it's not showing it. I can even think of the Hebrew tanina share.
Is this the same word? Is this the same word that in some places in English Bibles would be translated as a dragon in the old days?
Likely so. I mean, we could look that up right now if you want, because again, I don't use these Bibles, but let's say I want to see a King James. So I know there's a King James online.
I know that there were old English translations that had like unicorn. There's one of them that talks about a unicorn.
Yeah. I don't want to go too
And
far. Let's say
how did the unicorn get left off the boat, you know?
I'm just thinking, how do they translate it in Exodus over there? Chapter, what did we say? What chapter was it? 7? Let's say we go to chapter 7. Cast thy rod and become a serpent. So there he translates it as serpent. Right? He cast down his rod, became a serpent. They cast down their rods and were serpents. But then we had the other place that we saw it was in Isaiah, right? So that's in Isaiah 27. So let's look at that. You guys all seeing the King James here?
Yes, sir.
I have to confess, I feel dirty looking at a King James, but
I don't blame you.
I do want here. The sort of punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. So here he's translating nachash as serpent, even though before he translated tanin as serpent. You see, when we were looking at Exodus, the word was tanin, and he translated it as serpent. But in Isaiah, the word is nachash, and he translates nachash as serpent. And then when he gets to tanin, the tanin that is in the sea, it's dragon. Okay? So even in the King James, they vary their translation. I'm not super surprising, but I'm not saying that what we're going to see tonight is going to be much different than that. Did I just lose the text?
Rabbi Mullet.
Yeah.
I was just going to tell you in Job 30:29, it has it as, I think, as dragon.
Job 30:29.
On the King James. Yeah, in the King James.
So here, I don't know. Here in Job 7, verse 12, you have it. Hayam ani im tanin kitisim al mishmar. I am the sea with a tanin, if you shall put upon me a guard. Job is very cryptic, but again, if you want to look at what that would be in the King James, we could do that again. But we'll look in the Hebrew also for the verse you cited. But let's just look here. If I go to the book of Job, the order is different in the Christian Bible, so it's a little hard for me. But Job, what is it? See, Eov is Job. 7:12, also 7:12. Isn't that interesting? Because it was Exodus 7:12 also. Therefore I will not refrain my mouth speaking the language. No, sorry. Am I a sea? Oh, it's a question. Am I a sea or a whale? How do you like that? Tanin is a whale in Job 7. It's Job 7:12, which goes with my picture in the background, right? So that was Google Gemini. I went with that one. Yeah, you like that? Now, which verse in Job were you citing?
Job 30:29 in the King James Version.
Okay, so 30:29 in a King James, and we'll look it up in Hebrew. I am a brother to the dragons and a companion to the owls. Is that what you were referring to? Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that's what you said. You said it was translated as dragons. Like, is this consistent with what you predicted?
I hadn't looked at the Hebrew yet. I just pulled up
Oh, so I don't know what it says in the Hebrew. We're gonna find out. Do we say, is it 30:29? What is 30:29?
yes.
All right, so let's look right now in the Hebrew. Okay, go to texts, Tanakh. Go to Job 30:29. Achaiti letanim. Look how it's spelled here. Tanim. Tanim with a mem, not tanin with a nun. Now, tanim with a mem could be the same creature, but sometimes it means jackals. Let's see. What does Rashi say about the word tanim? Tanim, he doesn't. He seems to understand. This would be like, more simply, tanim would be jackals. Rashi doesn't seem to interpret it as anything other than what it plainly appears to be.
I have an idea.
Yeah.
So I was telling you about comparisons that ChatGPT did for me of certain words, very old words in Genesis that are like clearly present in texts from 2000 BC in Mesopotamia, or the Moabite carvings that they have, or Ugaritic, these different things. What if this from tannin to tanim, or vice versa, is just a shift, as happens when things go from one language to another, or a variation of the language, as Hebrew seems to be to ancient Akkadian or Ugaritic or Moabite, what have you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying that maybe they are the same word, and it's just a shift.
What I'm
at the
saying
end.
is sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. So I'm looking right here at Safaria. Now, if you could see above my head right now, that it says letanim. This commentator writes min nachash, which means a type of snake or serpent, right? So that's how he's interpreting it. I'm seeing that Lizzie put in the chat Ezekiel 29:3, which may be the verse in Ezekiel I was thinking of. So let's take a look at that one. Okay, let's go to Ezekiel 29:3. We're getting so far, of course. 29:3. Okay. Yeah, that's why I didn't find it in that search, because here is again one of those instances where tanim is used interchangeably with tanin. Now I'm gonna scroll up so you could see what's behind my head over here. You can see that it says Tana would be like a singular, meaning jackals, but also dragon or sea monster. So this word can be flexible in its meaning, but over here it's clear that it is some type of a sea creature, or I should say a aquatic creature, because it says speak and say, thus said Hashem, God, Hineni alecha paro melech Mitzrayim, behold, I am upon you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, hatanim hagadol, the great tanim. He's calling Pharaoh the great tanim, harovetz betoch ya'arav, lying in his Yaorav. Now, Yaor is the Hebrew word for the Nile River, but when it's plural, it means like channels, like water, channels of water. Okay, so he's lying in his watery channels. Asher Amar Li Ori, and who said, Pharaoh said, God is saying, you, Pharaoh, you're a great tanim, you're this great reptile, lying in the water, saying, Asher Amar Li Ori, the Yaor, the Nile is mine. Va'ani asitini, and I made myself. Okay, that is to say, Pharaoh identified himself as the god of the Nile. He, so to speak, said, no one created me, I created myself. Okay, and I am the Nile. And I guess the depiction of this god of the Nile was some type of reptilian, one would understand, crocodilian form, because the crocodile would be the, so to speak, serpent of the Nile, would be the Nile crocodile. So that's the clearest context where the Tanim Hagadol, the great Tanim, which is somewhat identical to our phrase in Genesis, tanninim hagedolim, the great tanninim, and it's described here as lying in the Nile, if you will. So, and a tannin is also synonymous with a snake. So it's some type of a serpent. I think serpent is the best translation. Tanin gadol would be a big serpent or a great serpent. Tanninim gedolim would be the great serpents. That would be the best translation. Now, let's go back to the verse at hand. Now, the problem is, again, so what is being described? It says, and God created the great tanninim, the great serpents. Okay. Now, some translations say the great sea monsters. Okay. Now, we saw there's the Leviathan. In fact, there are two Leviathans that are spoken of in that verse in Isaiah, the straight Leviathan and the bent Leviathan. Sometimes you'll see these pictures from mystical depictions of kind of a straight snake and a snake going in like a ring shape, like eating its tail and whatever. Don't get me started. Anyway, so okay, so that's one idea. The great serpents. So and why would this be translated as sea monsters? Okay, so hold that thought. All right. I'm going to show you that Rashi, for example, does not translate this way. Rashi, I'll put it up as high as I can put it so it should appear above my head. You can see that Rashi says, Dagim Gidolim Shabayam, the great fish of the sea. Now, I will caveat that by saying that even though dag literally translates as fish in modern Hebrew, in classical Hebrew, a dag could just mean an aquatic creature. It doesn't specifically mean something with scales and etc. We know that we talked about this in Jonah when a dag gadol, a great dag, swallowed him. We don't know what that creature was. People talk about Jonah and the whale, and then someone says, but a whale's not a fish. And my response to you is, what makes you think that the authors of the Bible did not describe a whale as a fish? It's not abundantly clear, right? So when Rashi says that the Dagim Gidolim Shebayam, the great fish of the sea, doesn't mean like a guppy, a big giant goldfish or something like that. It could be a whale. See, like you're behind me. It means a great aquatic creature. We just don't know. Is it a serpent? Is it a sea monster? You know. But Rashi himself does identify it as being in the sea, even though it's not explicit here. But the truth is, if we're honest with ourselves, the context does give over to that. The reason I'm saying that as a caveat is because we discussed a little bit earlier about the possibility of dinosaurs being in the text here. Schroeder writes this in his book, that since tannin is a reptile, as we find with crocodiles and snakes that are both called tannin, serpentine creatures, and these are described as,
What was the other one you said? It was like a hyena or a dog of some type?
well, tanninim would be a plural when it's called tannim, specifically with a mem.
Oh, okay. I got
So
you.
then
Sorry.
it has the possibility of being a plural of the word for jackal. And it could mean jackals, plural. But as you pointed out, in Semitic languages, the N sound and the M sound did sometimes interchange, so that the word, and we do find that in the Torah, and we do find that in the Tanakh sometimes, occasionally, so that the word tannin with an N sound, a nun, and tanim with a mem could have identical meaning, as we saw a couple of examples of that, like in Ezekiel, and at least some interpretations of Job. So we have these serpentine creatures that are called here tanninim, gedolim, big ones. So Schroeder proposes that these are the dinosaurs. Now I'm going to show you why that's difficult in a moment, okay? Because it says he creates them. And what should immediately bother you is that why does it say God creates them? The only time we have creation prior to now is creation ex nihilo. And then we have vaya'as, God made, and we see that pre-existing matter is being shaped and formed into new creations. But there's no ex nihilo. So what's the ex nihilo of vayivra Elokim et tanninim hagedolim? We had, for plant life, we had this verb of tadshe, which the verb literally means grass. The land should produce grass, right? Vatotse haaretz desha, the earth put forth grass. And we had for the creatures in the sea in the last verse, yishritzu, the waters should sheretz, literally the waters should crawling creature, right? Should produce these creatures. But vayivra Elokim et tanninim hagedolim, God creates. Why is he creating? So what's ex nihilo here? So that's answered when you read the verse forward, because it says ve, and what? Eight kol nephesh chayya haromeset. And what's kol? Anyone know kol?
Is it all?
All.
Good. And all nephesh chayya. We had that last time. Nephesh chayya. Anyone remember?
It's life and soul or spirit.
Right, living spirit. And every living spirit, haromeset. Okay, well, let's put romeset aside for now. And every living spirit, meaning the creation of the aquatic life and even the bird or flying creatures, like we spoke about last time, this is a new category of creation, because these are animals. These are, so to speak, living creatures. And we distinguish between plants that do have a kind of a life force. They grow, after all, but when animal life is sort of a different category, and it has, as we spoke before, the first time we're identifying in the text, a nephesh. Plants do not have a nephesh. A nephesh is a spirit, and it's, as the word indicates, it's something nafshi. It's something spiritual. Something spiritual does not germinate from something physical. And so when God commands that the earth should bring forth these creatures, it's the earth is, or the earth, the water, I mean, physical matter, the water on earth, it's only bringing forth the bodily form that will house the living spirit. But the living spirit itself has to be created ex nihilo, because it's a totally new thing. So God created the tanninim hagedolim ve'eit kol nefesh chayya haromeset. You have to read it together. And all of the living spirits, haromeset we'll get to. But the Vayivra, the creation, is going on the fact that these are all new. They're new creations in the fact that they have a spiritual component. They have an animal spirit, which we spoke more at length last time. Therefore, the word creation is necessary in describing their genesis, as it were, because there is something new here. Okay. Let's go. We're getting low on time, so I want to move forward. You can stop me if you need to stop me, but I wanted to point out why it says Vayivra and how it has to go together with the nephesh ve'et kol nephesh chayya. Okay. Now you'll ask, why did? Okay, I already said I'm going to show you why it's hard to make these dinosaurs. So let's leave some other questions off the table for now. Okay, haromeset. What does the word haromeset mean? The shoresh is resh mem sin. Okay, now here I'll scroll up a little bit. You could see Sefaria offers that ramas means to creep, to move lightly, move about, walk on all fours. Okay, so romes is another word that describes creeping creatures, creeping, crawling motion is romes. Okay, so now we said before that the crawling creatures, the sherets, that even sea creatures can be described as crawling because the swimming motion is like a crawling motion. You could like crawling through the water. Like I said, think about what snake slithers on the earth is how fish wiggle their way through the water. And here is a word that is sort of synonymous with that. But sherets, romes has more to do with the motion, emphasizes more the motion, and where sherets maybe has more to do with the swarming nature of it. Okay, now for example, let's look at the Targum. Okay, I'm going to show you the Targum. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, because it's going to come up in the sidebar, right? The Targum, the Aramaic translation. I'll try to show it to you as best as I can. I know you can only see the top two lines above my head, so it says, Uvra Hashem yat taninaya rav revaya, very direct, and Hashem created the great tanninim, v'yat kol nafsha chayta, and all the living souls, living spirits, as it were, dirchishu. Now, dirchishu is the translation in Aramaic of haromeset. So you can see that the shoresh ramas is being replaced with, I lost it. Right over here, rachash. Now, what does it say? Look at the Hebrew. All the living spirit, haromeset, that crawl, asher sharitzu hamayim leminehem. What's asher? Anyone?
What? That? Something like
that. All the, right? And all the living spirits, living creatures, if you will, haromeset, that crawl, asher, that sharitzu hamayim, that the water sharatz, that's the verb from the verse before that. It said yishrish ritzu hamayim, let the waters swarm, let the waters teem. Okay, so asher sharatzu hamayim, that the waters swarmed, meaning the waters followed God's directive and it swarmed with these creatures, right? So look at the Targum. I'll see if I can get it back. The Targum on the word sharatzu hamayim. Okay. V'yat kol nafsha chayta, and all the living creatures, dirchisha, that crawl, di archishu, Maya. The next word is Maya. You can't see it here. I'll go down a little bit. The archishu Maya, that the waters archishu. Look at the shorsh of archishu. Resh, chet, shin. Same as here. The archisha. So all the living creatures that crawl, the archishu Maya, that the waters crawled. Now, the waters didn't crawl, but like we said, it's a verb that is describing the production of the crawling creatures, where in Hebrew, there's two different words for it, sheretz and remes, right? This word here and this word here. In the Aramaic, they're completely synonymous. Rachash, rachash. Okay, so it's hard to distinguish between these two words. They both have to do with crawling, but it seems that like sheretz has more to do with the swarming nature of the creature, and the remes has more to do with the movement of the creature. But within the same verse, all the living creatures haromeset that crawl, asher sharetzu hamayim, that the waters swarmed. Okay, I'm just pointing out that's what the words are similar in meaning, but perhaps with a nuance that is difficult to capture. Okay. But you see that we're talking about aquatic creatures. Okay. And then it says liminehem. We had liminehem before. Anyone remember liminehem or something similar? I'll show you where we had it before.
Leminehu, I think.
Yeah. That we had that the earth brought forth whatever we said, vegetation, herbage, mazria zera, producing seed, liminehu. Anyone remember that? What it means?
After their kind, I think.
Kind, right? Min is a kind. Minehu, its kind. Liminehu, according to its kind. So we have over here, back to our verse, okay? Liminehem. The difference between liminehu and liminehem is hem over here means them or their, their. So as opposed to liminehu, its kind, liminehem means according to
Their kind.
their kind, okay? And the only difference is because there the noun is singular and here the noun is plural. Actually, the noun is not plural here, to be honest. It's not. It's nephesh. Although, yeah, it seems to be going back on both the tanninim הגדולים and all the nephesh chayya, the living creatures, even though nephesh chayya is singular. And it's like we said, sometimes you could have a singular, which is sort of one collective body that includes all the individuals within the body. So nephesh chayya, even though it means literally living spirit, but kol nephesh chayya, all of the living spirit, meaning all the living creatures, haromeset, that's also singular, that is crawling, but it refers to the entire group. But also here we have plural, hataninim hagedolim, the great tanninim. So according to their kinds, there seems to be going back on everything the verse has mentioned so far, that God created them, that the water produced according to their kinds. And then we have ve'et kol of kanaf, okay? Ve'et and object, what? Meaning it seems that God also created, because we're creating what? The spirit. Kol of kanaf. Now, what's kol of?
All the chickens.
No. Silly. Of is not chicken. Unless you're going into a butcher shop in Israel and you're asking for poultry. Then of is chicken.
I grew up in Oklahoma where people bring home birds on the weekend or in the fall and they roast them.
Okay, did they call them oaf?
No.
So what did we say last time? I know it's been a while, but what did we say last time? What's oaf?
Something foul.
Flying
That it
creatures
could
or
be foul.
fowl?
Someone else speaking?
Oh, no, I was just saying, like, flying creatures are foul.
Flying creatures. It could be foul, but it doesn't have to be foul, right? It means flying creatures. On all flying creatures, as we spoke about last time, there's different possibilities what it means. Is it referring to birds or is it referring to
Bats.
flying creatures? Even bats
Bats.
may be
Squirrels.
included in it. Maybe flying squirrels. I don't know. It depends what's its primary locomotion, whether or not squirrels would be. But we will see that there could be certain flying rodents that will be included in the Torah's list of non-kosher, so to speak, birds that are described this way. So it really just means, and again, that's a bat is a bird, like a whale is a fish. You know what I'm saying? It means flying creature or aquatic creature. Anyway, so all flying creatures, and then we have the word kanaf. There's a new word. Does anyone know what the word kanaf means?
It sounds like a dessert for some reason, but I know that's not it.
Kanafe. Kanafe. So kanaf literally means a wing. Could also refer, I think, to feathers. It also could refer to like an extremity, like the corner of the garment is called the kanaf. Like when it says the famous verse in Zechariah chapter 8 that 10 Gentiles from every language will grab onto the hem of a Jew, the hem meaning the end of his clothing. The word there is kanaf, the extremity of his clothing, the end, as it were. So a kanaf in terms of birds means the wing, right? That long extremity of the bird that they used to fly. So kol of kanaf means every winged flying creature, or every flying creature of the wing, if you will. It's hard to imagine a flying creature that's not of the wing. So what exactly is the word wing doing there? I don't have an immediate answer for you, but I'm just translating right now. So again, and God created the great tanninim. We don't know what those are yet. And all the living creatures that crawl, that the waters produced or swarmed with according to their kind, and all the flying creatures of the wing. Liminehu. Okay, here's our friend Liminehu. What does it mean? Come on.
It's kind.
Well, minehu means its kind. What's liminehu?
Of their kind.
Of their kind, right? Of its kind. And here again, because oaf is singular noun, so its kind. But even though it refers to all the birds, the reason here in Minahem, their kind, as I said, is it seems to be going back not only on nephesh, chayya, which is singular, but also on tanninim gedolim, which is plural. So it includes all that. That's why this one's plural, their kind, and of kanaf, which is singular, it's its kind. Okay. And then vayar Elokim kitov, and God saw that it was good, that we have down pat. But now let's go back to some of the more difficult things. Dinosaurs. We had in verse 20, God says, let the waters teem with life, and the flying creatures should fly over the earth upon the firmament. We're dealing with sea life and sky life, if you will, not land life. And here again, God creates the tanninim gedolim and all the creatures that are, again, crawling. You're right, crawling, but we said that swimming can be described as crawling, that the water is produced according to their kind. Again, aquatic life. And all the flying creatures of the wing. So parallel to verse 20, where God says, let the waters teem with life and let the skies have flying life, that's exactly what comes to be. Life in the water and life in the sky. So the tanninim gedolim in context, even though you could say a tannin is a reptilian, and it's a big reptilian, big reptile, dinosaurs, but it's talking about aquatic life. It's not talking about land life. So it's very difficult to maintain that this is a reference to dinosaurs in the sense that we think of them as land reptiles, right? Aside from the fact I told you last time that they don't even believe that dinosaurs are reptiles anymore. They were birds. So it's an attempt to make it fit. We're trying to make our modern ideas fit in an ancient text to show how prescient the biblical author was. I think it's a little misplaced. And you can listen to last week's class for everything I had to say about how much weight we should put into so-called modern science. And by the way, a great podcast was published this week from Jordan Peterson. He interviewed a very papered PhD scientist. I mean, if you listen to his credentials, he's like a super scientist. The guy has thousands of citations. I mean, all the the credentials for someone who's really legit. This guy has them. He has like 20 PhDs, and he's cited in tens of thousands of scholarly papers, which is manifold times the average. Okay. And he even confesses to Jordan Peterson that most scientific discoveries do not come about through the scientific method, even though the papers are written to lead the reader to think they are. You think, and you're led to believe, and the scientist wants you to believe that he came about it through such a methodical process that's super logical. And he says, and you know who writes this also? There's a book I recommend you get. It's called Torah, Chazal, and Science. My brain is scattering over here. I'm going to bring it all back. Torah, Chazal, and Science. Chazal is spelled Chazal. It's a Hebrew acronym that means the sages of blessed memory. Torah, Chazal, and Science by Rabbi Moshe Meiselman, who is, again, one of my great teachers, who is also a PhD. He has a PhD from MIT, aside from being an extremely accomplished Torah scholar, where he writes towards the end of the book, in the last section of the book, it's a big 800-page book. Towards the end, he talks about the scientific method and the illusion of science is sort of irrefutable, and he really disillusions you. There's a guy with a PhD from MIT. He's like, it's not what you think. So that was the first time I was exposed to this, what I'm about to tell you. But the guy on Jordan Peterson's podcast, who's like a super scientist, confesses this in the interview, that everything Rabbi Meiselman writes, he doesn't cite him, but he says the same exact thing. The way scientific discoveries happen is not like in the super logical, methodical way. It's not. And like I said, Rabbi Meiselman writes this. A lot of it comes about through the individual person's intuition. He has an intuition that I feel like it should be like this. I can't explain why. It's a gut feeling. You could imagine writing this in a scientific paper. I had a gut feeling, right? Rabbi Meiselman exposes this. Scientific discoveries, innovations start with a gut feeling, and then the scientist figures out a way to prove or disprove his gut feeling. You might call it a hypothesis, but the hypotheses are made in a way. Even when we were in science school, you had to write your scientific method. You had to write your hypothesis sort of knowing where the end. I hypothesize that you never write a failed hypothesis, right? Your hypothesis is your guess. It's what your educated guess. It's what you think is going to happen. But when you're writing a paper for science class or you're doing a science experiment, you don't want it to fail. First, you make sure it works. Then you go back and you jerry-rig your hypothesis to lead you to the place you have to end up, right? So the scientist kind of knows where he has to end up, and he gets there more through a gut feeling process than from some kind of like step-by-step A, B, C, D, E, F, G process. But once he gets to Z, he reverse engineers the A, B, C, D, E, F, G that leads him to Z, as though that was the process he took, when it's really not the process that he took. Meiselman writes this, and this scientist confesses this in the Jordan Peterson interview. Why am I bringing this up? I'm just talking about the well-placed skepticism towards like the infallibility of science. So my point of bringing that up again here is I don't feel there's a need to stretch and bend and warp the text of the Torah to fit modern scientific ideas. There is no reason to do this whatsoever, and it's an ill-placed endeavor. Okay, it's not honest. It's not intellectually honest, and we're not doing a service to God by doing that, nor to the religious believer, nor to anybody else. So Schroeder's book does a lot of this, and that's where he puts dinosaurs into the text. And if we're honest, I don't think they're there. Is it possible that they're there? It's possible. And it's even possible from the word romeset. And here where some of them say, why is it used the word romeset? Romeset really does connote more, like we said, a type of walking motion on land. It sort of is strange to find in a verse dealing with the creation of aquatic creatures, that it would refer to a kind of walking motion, and therefore you could maybe surmise that the verse is describing a kind of transition of creatures from the sea to the land, which would comport with science. And I'm not even quoting like modern writers who are trying to comport the text with science. You could look back at some of the classical commentaries way before they knew about dinosaurs or evolution or anything else, and you could see that they're not saying quite the way I'm saying it, but they do relate the word romes to actually like walking on earth. So then what is that doing with sea creatures? And some of them talk about, well, there are some sea creatures that come up onto the earth, but they primarily live in the sea, but they also come up onto the earth, and that's what's being described. So you could read into the verse a kind of progression of creatures from the sea to the land, and if you want to say it that way, you could maybe include tanninim gadolim as both in the sea and out of the sea, and romeset, some even relate it to the word romes with a samech and not a sin, which I'm going to show you something now that might surprise you. Check this out. Here, pe'alim.com, another great website that was recommended to me by Jacob Federecci, pe'alim.com. You can, put in any Hebrew word here, and it'll tell you the root and what it means and all the conjugations. So, ramas, it's very small, so you might not be able to see it, but resh mem samech, it translates here as to trample or to crush, whereas we were saying resh mem sin. Oh yeah, now it's giving me the whole table here. But resh mem sin, which is the verb here, which means crawling, if you change the sin to a samech, which doesn't change the pronunciation, then we go from crawling to trampling or crushing. And some want to say that these verbs are kind of interchangeable with one another. And that would mean that this verb is referring to creatures who are literally trampling or crushing. Now, that cannot be in the sea. So if you want to read it that way, and you can go back and see early commentators suggest this, then we're forced, I don't know if we're forced, but then I guess it lends more to reading the verse to be referring to large land creatures that had a trampling or crushing kind of a walk, which does fit dinosaurs. But for me, the puzzling thing is, what is it doing with the aquatic creatures? So I leave that to you to ponder. Are we talking exclusively about aquatic creatures? Are we talking about creatures that emerge from the water onto the land? Is that really what's being described in the Torah? Or is that some kind of retroactive wishful thinking? I'm really going to leave that for your own interpretation. So what are the tanninim hagedolim? We don't really know. Are they great serpentine creatures? Rashi says, dagim gedolim shabayam, great sea creatures. There's some type of very large sea creatures, so large and remarkable that the Torah had to point them out on their own. It couldn't just include it with all living creatures, and these guys that were like really whoo-wee, something very remarkable that the Torah wants to point out on its own. So whales, dinosaurs, sea monsters. I leave it to you to imagine. Okay, and now it's late, so I gotta go.
Rabbi Malik, can I ask you something real quick?
Yeah.
When you were talking about these possibly land animals that maybe went into the sea, it kind of takes me back to is that chapter, well, with the serpent and Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
and he doesn't crawl on the ground until after Hashem says cursed.
Mm.
So doesn't that kind of lead you to believe that he had walked on arms and legs before he cursed him to slither on the ground? Or
It certainly seems that way because the curse is he should crawl on his belly, which means prior to that he did not crawl on his belly. Now, not all, so that means that even the nachash, which we translate as snake, had legs, right? So, crocodiles have legs, right? So we know that there are reptilian creatures that most reptilians have legs. I mean, a snake is somewhat exceptional that it doesn't, right? And God says,
Ooh, is that also a kanaf?
no, kanaf does not.
Legs?
No,
It's only wings?
only wings.
Or okay.
Right. Even though I said extremity, but it's never used for legs. Like the corners of the earth, arba kanfot haaretz, the far reaches of the earth. It's but that is like.
Well, I was wondering if Nachash could have had something else other than arms or legs, because it doesn't say what other kind how it
It's
came
never
up.
described as a winged creature, but the idea of kanaf being extremity is evocative of the wingspan of a winged creature, that the wings stretch out very far. So it could mean the extremity of clothing, extremity of the earth, or a wing on a creature. It doesn't mean another part of the creature other than the wing, unless maybe it could be feathers. But I'll tell you this: there is a midrash that is an ancient rabbinic oral tradition that the snake, prior to the sin, it's described as a camel. And it's not a camel, but it says like a camel. It is described as like a camel. So imagine a snake, but like a camel. That sounds like a dinosaur, doesn't it? A big reptilian camel-shaped, camel-sized creature, right? Meaning you you ride on a camel. Imagine you can like ride on a dinosaur, ride on a nachash, a snake with legs, like a quadruped. It's described as a large quadruped. That's what it's described in the midrash. It's pretty remarkable. Okay, I gotta go.
Good night, and thank you,
Thank you very
sir.
much, Rabbi.
Take care, everybody.
thank
We'll
you,
see you
Rabbi
next.
Malik.
Have a good one.
Bye, let's have.
Bye. Bye.